Bass vibrated through the marble floor hard enough to rattle glass. The VIP doors opened and the shift was immediate. Conversations thinned. Laughter sharpened. Men straightened. Women adjusted dresses, lips, posture. Power had entered the room and everyone felt it before they saw him. Jihan Kim didn't rush. He never did. Black suit. No tie. Calm eyes that didn't search because they never had to. The club moved around him like gravity had tilted. Except her. At the far end of the bar, beneath a wash of violet light, she kept wiping the same section of counter with slow, deliberate strokes. Dark skin catching neon. White shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow. Silver watch flashing when her wrist turned. She didn't look up. Not when he crossed the room. Not when his security detail fanned out. Not when 3 women abandoned their drinks to trail behind him. She poured 2 bourbons for a pair of bankers without glancing toward the storm she could feel forming. Jahan noticed. He noticed everything. The slight tightening of shoulders from the waitstaff. The bartender beside her suddenly overperforming. The way the DJ subtly lowered the tempo to let the moment breathe. And still she did not look. He paused at the base of the VIP steps. From there he could see the entire floor. He could see her reflection in the mirrored shelves behind the bottles. Focused, unimpressed. His jaw flexed once. Not anger. Something colder. Curiosity edged with offense. Women had built careers trying to catch his eye. Politicians' daughters had rehearsed lines. Influencers had memorized his drink preference. She wiped the counter like he was background noise. A blonde in sequins touched his sleeve. "Appa, your table is ready." He didn't answer. His gaze remained fixed on the bartender who refused to acknowledge the shift in air pressure. She reached for a shaker. His crack. Metal snapped into place. She moved with efficiency that bordered on indifference. No wasted motion. No flirtation. No fear. One of his captains leaned closer. "Boss." Subtle question. "Do we proceed? Do we escalate?" Jihan stepped into the VIP lounge anyway. The crowd exhaled. The room returned to orbit around him. But he didn't sit. From the elevated platform he had a perfect view of her. She laughed at something a customer said. It wasn't a seductive laugh. It was brief, honest. And it wasn't for him. That was the problem. He watched as a man leaned too close across the bar. She shifted her weight without retreating. Not submissive. Not defensive. Just controlled. Her eyes flicked up once, past the man, past the noise, and skimmed across the room. They crossed his for half a second. Nothing changed in her expression. No widening. No hesitation. No recognition of hierarchy. She looked away first. Back to the drink. Back to work. Something inside his chest tightened in a way he didn't appreciate. In his world, attention was automatic. Refusal was war. Rose. The women near him straightened instantly, thinking they'd been chosen. He stepped past them. Down the VIP stairs. Through the dance floor. Conversations fractured as he moved. Phones lifted discreetly. Staff froze mid-step. His security followed 2 paces behind. She sensed the silence before she saw him. The temperature shifted. Even the bankers stopped talking. But she didn't lift her head. He stopped directly in front of her station. Close enough to see the faint scar near her wrist. Close enough to smell citrus and smoke from the drink she was finishing. "Whiskey," he said. His voice didn't need volume. Carried anyway. She slid the finished cocktail to its owner. Wiped her hands on a clean towel. Then finally she looked at him. Not up at him. Him. "We have several." Her tone was neutral. Professional. No tremor. "Surprise me." Was. Just a fraction too long to be accidental. Then she turned away to select a bottle from the top shelf without asking preference, without asking budget, without asking permission. The crowd was watching openly now. This wasn't normal. The boss didn't sit at the bar. The boss didn't wait. The boss didn't get evaluated. She poured carefully. Me. set the glass in front of him without ceremony. Their fingers didn't touch. He didn't break eye contact when he lifted it. She had already moved on to the next customer. As if he were ordinary. As if he were background noise. A murmur rippled through the room. One of his captains shifted uneasily. This was visible. This was narrative. This was dangerous. Jihan didn't return to VIP. Instead, he pulled out the bar stool and sat. Directly in front of her. In full view of the club. Gasps disguised as coughs. Phones lowered slowly. Power had relocated. She glanced at him once, measuring, then continued working as if nothing significant had happened. But something had. He had stepped down from his throne to sit in her orbit. The room understood the weight of that choice, even if she pretended not to. He took a slow sip. Perfect balance. She knew her craft. He set the glass down. "What's your name?" She didn't hesitate. "Maya." No honorific. No deference. Just a fact. A new silence settled between them, thicker than the music. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on polished marble. She did not retreat. In a room built on submission and spectacle, she offered neither. And that refusal felt more provocative than seduction. His security exchanged glances. This was no longer about a drink. It was about control. It was about narrative. It was about the only person in the building who hadn't reacted the way they were supposed to. He watched her pour another drink for someone else, her focus unwavering, and realized something unsettling. She wasn't performing resistance. She simply wasn't impressed. And that made her dangerous. The bass climbed again. The club breathed. But the center of gravity had shifted to a quiet war unfolding across a bar counter. Why was she the only one not reacting to him? The music swelled again, but the tension at the bar stayed tight, coiled. Jihan didn't move from the stool. He didn't need to. The entire club had already adjusted around the fact that he had chosen this seat. Maya continued working as if the gravitational shift meant nothing. Orders came in waves. She handled them in sequence. Efficient. Precise. When 3 women slid into the empty stools beside him, perfume thick and deliberate, she didn't glance at them either. She poured their drinks before his refill. She served a table of loud executives before acknowledging his empty glass. She served him last. Not accidentally. Not nervously. Intentionally. The message was subtle but unmistakable. You wait like everyone else. When she finally stepped in front of him again, her expression was composed. "Another, sir." The word landed clean. Not Jihan. Not Mr. Kim. No reverence. No fear. Just distance. He studied her face for cracks. There were none. "You've been here 3 months," he said quietly. She poured without reacting. "Yes, sir." Salary increased twice. Ice dropped into the glass. Steady hands. "Yes, sir." Thursday shifts removed from rotation. "You requested that." Slight pause. Barely perceptible. "Correct. You leave at 2:17 a.m. Most nights. Uber. Black sedan. Same driver." The glass touched the counter softly. Her eyes lifted to his. Not wide. Not startled. Just calculating. Around them, the nearest customers had fallen silent. The women beside him shifted uncomfortably. This was no longer flirtation. This was information. "Is there a problem with my performance?" she asked evenly. He held her gaze. "No. Then I assume you track all staff this carefully." A dangerous question. Not accusatory. Just measured. One of his captains took a step forward, sensing edge. Jihan didn't break eye contact. "I track what interests me." Beep. The air thickened. Most people would have softened. Or flattered. Or panicked. Maya wiped the counter between them as if she were cleaning up a spill. "Interest can be misinterpreted," she said. "Especially in rooms like this." The subtle boundary hung between them. He leaned back slightly, reassessing. She wasn't naive. She understood optics. She understood risk. "Are you uncomfortable?" he asked. No, sir. Title again. Distance reinforced. Should I be? That one was sharper. A blade hidden in velvet. A few feet away, someone laughed too loudly to mask the tension. Jihan felt it then. The unfamiliar sensation of resistance that wasn't rebellion. She wasn't challenging him openly. She was simply not bending. You're very calm, he said. I prefer stability. Even when stability is illusion. Her eyes didn't flicker. Especially then. That answer settled somewhere under his ribs. He changed direction. Your second job. Still at the neighborhood bar. A fractional tightening in her jaw. There it was. Shift. Yes. You don't need it. Need isn't the only reason people work. She didn't elaborate. He watched her for signs of fear. There were none. Only awareness. He knew too much. That was the new threat. Not physical. Informational. Most employees would crumble under the weight of that knowledge. She stood straighter. If there's an issue with my employment, she said, I'd prefer to discuss it privately with management. The emphasis was deliberate. You are not management. He almost smiled. Almost. I am management. Not yet. That one landed harder than it should have. Around them the room shifted again. Whispers spread like heat through fabric. Jihan reached for his phone without looking away from her. Single text. 30 seconds later, the club manager pushed through the crowd, pale. Sir. Bring the documents. The manager hesitated. The entire bar was watching now. Maya's expression didn't change, but her shoulders squared slightly. The manager returned with a slim leather folder. Jihan stood from the stool, towering now, reclaiming height. He flipped the folder open and signed without reading. Then he turned it outward so the nearest cameras could see the motion clearly. Effective immediately, he said calmly. I am the sole owner of this establishment. A ripple of shock tore through the room. The manager's face drained. The women beside him froze. Security straightened. Power had just consolidated in public. Maya did not move. Staff restructuring begins tonight, he continued. All contracts under review. Scheduling, compensation, oversight. His gaze returned to her. Direct reporting to me. Silence crashed over the bar heavier than the bass. Her hand stilled for the first time. Not trembling. Just still. Then she resumed wiping the counter. Understood, sir. No anger. No gratitude. Just acknowledgement. He had escalated the board. Publicly. Strategically. The club was his now. Every shift. Every camera. Every payroll detail. If he wanted proximity, he had purchased it. And everyone in the room understood the implication. She set a fresh glass in front of him without being asked. Congratulations on your acquisition, she said evenly. It wasn't sarcasm. It wasn't warmth. It was composure under pressure. He searched her face for something. Fear, admiration, resentment. Nothing surfaced. That unsettled him more than panic would have. Control had always worked for him. Till now. He lifted the glass slowly. The room remained suspended, waiting for the next move, for the visible assertion of dominance or dismissal. Instead, he took a measured sip and sat back down at the bar as if nothing monumental had occurred. Maya turned away to serve another customer. The music gradually resumed its volume. Conversations restarted, thinner than before. But the power dynamic had changed permanently. The club belonged to him now. And she worked directly under his authority. That should have simplified things. Didn't. Because despite the purchase, despite the public consolidation, despite the undeniable shift in hierarchy, she had not flinched. And that raised a quieter, more dangerous question beneath the noise and neon glow. Did he just buy the club to get closer to her? The club ran smoother under his ownership. Or at least it looked that way. New scanners at the entrance. Extra cameras in blind corners. Staff quieter. More careful. Maya remained exactly the same. She arrived at 6:42 p.m. every shift. Tied her hair back. checked inventory personally, avoided the VIP stares without appearing to avoid them. Jihan noticed patterns the way other men noticed faces. She left at 2:17 a.m. sharp unless closing required otherwise. No lingering. No after-shift drinks. No flirting for tips. And every Thursday she disappeared before sunset. The second job wasn't about money alone. The transfer records confirmed that. Consistent wire, first of every month. Same account. Different bank. Not in her name. He leaned back in his office chair. Screens reflecting off polished wood. He didn't enjoy prying. He preferred leverage earned face to face. But she had made herself a variable. And variables required mapping. The account she sent money to was linked to a small medical facility outside the city. Long-term care. Pediatric. His jaw tightened once. That narrowed the possibilities. He closed the file without comment. Downstairs, the bass trembled faintly through the ceiling. He could see her from the balcony monitor. Focused. Detached from spectacle. She never looked up at the VIP lounge anymore. Not since he bought the place. She treated the new hierarchy the same way she treated the old one. His background noise. That irritated him less now. It intrigued him more. One of his captains knocked lightly. "Boss. Speak. We've had repeat visitors. Table 12. 3 nights this week." Jihan's eyes shifted to the camera feed. Table 12 sat at a perfect angle to the bar but far enough from VIP to avoid direct attention. 3 men. Different suits each night. Same posture. Watching without drinking much. Names. Shell IDs. Clean paperwork. But their vehicle rotated plates. We traced the chassis. Was. Seonghwa Syndicate. The air in the office cooled. Seonghwa didn't waste time on nightlife theatrics. They moved when there was leverage. Or weakness. Jihan stood slowly and walked toward the balcony overlooking the club floor. From here he saw everything. And now he saw it clearly. Table 12 wasn't watching him. They weren't scanning security patterns. They weren't studying entry points. Their gaze remained fixed on the bar. Maya. She was pouring a rye without glancing in their direction. Oblivious or pretending to be. "How long?" he asked quietly. "Since before the ownership transfer." That detail landed heavier than the rest. Before he bought the club. Before he publicly centralized control. They had already been here. Watching her. Not him. His mind moved quickly through scenarios. She worked 2 jobs. She sent money monthly. She avoided VIP. Not because she feared proximity. Because she avoided visibility. He signaled subtly to cut music volume by 10%. The shift was barely perceptible, but enough to change the atmosphere. He descended from the balcony without security this time. Alone. The floor parted instinctively. He didn't approach the bar. He walked directly to table 12. The 3 men straightened almost imperceptibly. "Enjoying the hospitality?" he asked lightly. One of them smiled thinly. "Your acquisition has improved the place." "Has it?" He didn't sit. Didn't offer courtesy. His eyes flicked toward the bar once. Deliberate. The men followed the glance before catching themselves. There it was. Confirmation. "Careful where you direct your attention," Jihan said softly. "Some things in my establishment are not decorative." A faint smile from the man at the end. "We admire talent. That's all. Admire from a distance." His tone hardened by a degree. Enough. They held eye contact a second too long before nodding in synchronized politeness. "Of course." Jihan turned and walked away without waiting for further response. But the damage had already been done. They had been watching her before he made a public claim to the club. Which meant she wasn't incidental to his orbit. She was already marked in someone else's calculations. Back at the bar, Maya set a drink down in front of a customer and felt the silence thicken. She didn't look at table 12. She didn't look at him. But her shoulders were tighter now. He stopped in front of her station. "You know them?" he asked quietly. Customers, she replied evenly. Yes, beep. I know how to pour their drinks. That's not what I asked. Her eyes lifted to his, and for the first time there was something else there. Not fear, not defiance, recognition. Should I? She asked. It was subtle, but it was a question loaded with awareness. She had noticed them too. They've been here before, he said. Frequently. Lots of people have. They don't look at lots of people. Silence slid between them. Around them, the club pulsed on, unaware that a quieter war had shifted direction. She leaned slightly closer, lowering her voice. If there's an issue, handle it without dragging me into it. That was interesting. Not don't handle it. Not leave me out. Just without dragging me in. As if she understood proximity carried consequences. You're already in it, he said. Her jaw flexed once. Minimal. Controlled. Then make sure it stays outside the bar. She stepped away to serve another guest. Conversation over. But nothing was resolved. Jihan moved back toward the stairs slowly, mind recalculating. Seonghwa didn't watch bartenders for sport. They watched leverage. And leverage implied value. In his world, nothing near him was accidental. Not beauty. Not resistance. Not coincidence. He glanced once more at table 12. One of the men raised his glass slightly in a mock toast. Not to him. To her. The message was subtle but unmistakable. She wasn't random. She had been observed long before he chose to notice her. Which meant this wasn't about ego anymore. It was about exposure. And exposure in his world never arrived without intent. Why were rivals interested in a bartender? The change began quietly. 2 new security personnel rotated near the bar, close enough to intervene but far enough to pretend they weren't assigned to her. The Uber she usually booked at 2:17 never arrived. Instead, a black sedan idled at the curb with tinted windows and a driver who didn't make eye contact. Her Thursday shift at the second bar was suddenly unavailable due to management review. She checked her phone twice before realizing the schedule had been adjusted from the inside. No one informed her. No one asked. When she returned to the club the next evening, the air felt tighter. The cameras angled slightly lower. Table 12 was empty. But that didn't mean the room wasn't watching. Maya tied her hair back as usual, but her movements were sharper now. She scanned exits without meaning to. She felt the proximity of security like a hand hovering just behind her shoulder. At midnight, Jihan stepped behind the bar for the first time. Not to serve. Just to stand within her orbit. The gesture alone sent a ripple through the floor. Why was my shift cancelled? She asked without turning. Direct. No greeting. Temporary adjustment. And the car. Safer. She set down a glass harder than necessary. Not loud. Just deliberate. You didn't ask. I don't need permission to secure what's inside my establishment. She faced him fully then. I'm not inventory. A muscle in his jaw tightened. You're being watched. I work in a nightclub. Not like this. Silence pressed between them. The security presence at the edge of the bar pretended not to hear. You replaced my driver, she said. You cancelled my other job. You reassign my shifts. That's not security. That's control. It's precaution. For who? The question landed heavier than the music. He held her gaze without blinking. You're safer near me. The words were calm. To come. She studied him, trying to measure whether that was reassurance or warning. And if I don't want to be near you? She asked. The air shifted. Not loud enough to draw attention, but enough that the bartender 2 stations down slowed her movements. That's not the variable right now, he replied. It should be. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Seonghwa doesn't circle without reason. Then handle Seonghwa. I am. By tracking me. He didn't deny it. That was worse. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. You think proximity protects me, she said. But it paints a target. You already had one. That stopped her. For a fraction of a second, uncertainty flickered across her expression. What does that mean? She asked quietly. Before he could answer, one of his captains approached from the edge of the floor. Boss! Subtle signal. Urgent but controlled. Jihan stepped away without explanation. Maya watched him ascend toward the balcony office, frustration coiling in her chest. She finished 2 drinks before glancing at the security stationed near her. They didn't move, didn't speak, just observed. Possession creates enemies. She didn't know why the thought surfaced, but it felt true. Upstairs, the intercepted report glowed on the screen. An encrypted surveillance document from Seonghwa's internal network, captured during a routine sweep. Attached image, the bar. Highlighted subject, Maya Thompson. Her name listed beneath the photo. Movement patterns, work hours, financial activity flagged. A notation circled in red, connected to Kim's establishment post-acquisition. Potential leverage. Jihan read it twice, then once more. The timing aligned perfectly with his public purchase of the club. Before that she had been background. After she was an asset, or liability. The room felt smaller. One of his advisors shifted uneasily. They believe she matters, the man said carefully. Jihan's eyes darkened. She shouldn't. But she does. That was the problem. Downstairs, Maya felt her phone vibrate. Unknown number. She ignored it. Then it vibrated again. A message preview flashed across her screen before she could stop it. Photo. Her mother's house. Taken recently. The caption read, "Beautiful neighborhood." Her pulse spiked once, hard. She locked the phone immediately, face neutral. Security noticed the subtle change in her posture. "Everything all right?" one of them asked quietly. She nodded without looking at him. Upstairs, Jihan received the same image seconds later through his encrypted channel. Confirmation. They had moved from observation to demonstration. He descended the stairs faster this time, not caring who noticed. He stopped in front of her, reading her expression. She didn't speak first, didn't show fear, but he saw it in the slight tension in her throat. "When did you receive it?" he asked quietly. "Just now." "Delete it." "Already did." "They're escalating." "Because of you," she said, not accusing, just stating fact. The bass thudded through the floor. Around them the club laughed, danced, drank, oblivious. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You are safer near me." This time it didn't sound like reassurance. Sounded like inevitability. Her jaw tightened. "Or I'm safer away from you." The words hovered between them, dangerous. His security tightened formation without command. And in that subtle shift, the room recalibrated again. She wasn't just a bartender anymore. She was listed in a rival surveillance report. She was marked, and the marking had intensified the moment he pulled her into his orbit publicly. Possession creates enemies. She felt the weight of that truth settle in her chest. Did being near him just mark her as leverage? The photo of her mother's house lingered in his mind long after the message was erased. It wasn't sloppy intimidation. It was precise, clean. Delivered seconds after his own intercepted report. Seonghwa wasn't improvising. They were responding to information already in motion. Jihan stood in his office with the financial dashboards open across 3 screens. Club revenue streams, liquor orders, private bookings, cash flow breakdowns. On the surface the numbers were strong, profitable, stable. But he wasn't looking for performance. He was looking for misalignment. Maya's shift schedule ran adjacent to certain high-value private transactions. VIP reservations paid in cash. Off-ledger deposits categorized as entertainment adjustment. Small discrepancies at first glance. Too small to alarm anyone who didn't know how to look. He zoomed deeper. The timestamps aligned with nights she worked extended hours. The transfers rerouted through Shell hospitality accounts before landing in a holding network he recognized but hadn't personally authorized. His jaw tightened. "Run the internal audit," he said quietly to his chief analyst. "Full cross-reference. Past 6 months." The analyst hesitated. "Including executive oversight?" "Especially executive oversight." Downstairs, Maya felt the shift in atmosphere again. The club floor hummed as usual, but security had doubled near the entrance. Her new driver waited in the alley before her shift ended. The phone message had changed something. Not fear. Awareness. She poured a drink for a regular who never tipped well and noticed table 12 was empty again. Too empty. Patterns that loud didn't vanish without reason. When Jihan returned to the bar, he didn't sit this time. He stood just close enough to be heard over the music. "You ever review the transaction logs?" he asked without preamble. She blinked once. "For what?" "Inventory discrepancies. Cash adjustments. That's management's role." "Humor me." She studied him. "Sometimes I flag unusual orders, bulk bookings. But I don't have system clearance beyond my terminal." "You have more than you think." That unsettled her. "Explain." He leaned closer, voice lower. "Your login credentials route through a mid-level finance hub. I clock in drinks. And you verify shift-end reconciliations." A pause. That was true. She signed off nightly totals when management was busy. Procedural convenience. "What are you implying?" she asked. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he nodded toward the stairwell. "Come upstairs." The words weren't a request. But they weren't a command either. They were something in between. She hesitated only a moment before signaling another bartender to cover her station. The walk to the office felt longer than usual. His security remained downstairs. He closed the door behind them. The screens illuminated the room in cold light. "Look," he said, stepping aside. She approached cautiously. Lines of numbers scrolled. Payment gateways. Routing addresses. Corporate entities layered like masks. Her eyes narrowed as she traced the timestamps. "These nights," he said quietly, "you worked extended shifts." She scanned further. Pattern emerged. Liquor invoices inflated. Private room rentals reclassified. Funds siphoned in increments too small to trigger automated alerts. Her breath slowed. "Someone is laundering through the club," she said. "Yes. And tying it to my shift logs. Indirectly." The realization hit like ice water. "They're using my reconciliation codes as cover." "Yes." Silence expanded between them. The tension that had once been about ego now shifted to something colder. Strategic. "Xianghua isn't watching you because they want you," he continued. "They're watching because they think you're access." She turned to face him fully. "To what?" "To this." He gestured at the screen. "These funds are not minor diversions. They are political leverage. Arms channels. Offshore placements." Her stomach tightened. "And you didn't authorize it?" No, that was the first time she saw genuine anger flicker across his expression. Controlled. Contained. But real. "Then someone inside your own structure is rerouting money and using the bar to hide it," she said. "Yes. And my name is attached to the transaction approvals." "Yes." She exhaled slowly, steadying herself against the desk. The situation had shifted entirely. She wasn't the object of desire in a nightclub drama. She was proximity to exposure in a financial war. "Xianghua thinks I'm your weakness," she said quietly. "They think you're the ledger." The words hung heavy. "You purchased the club publicly," she continued, "which made every internal movement traceable to you." He didn't respond. 'Cause she was right. His acquisition had centralized authority, and inadvertently highlighted the laundering network beneath it. "This was never about attraction," she said. The phrase settled like a verdict. "No," he agreed. "It wasn't." She stepped back from the screens, pulse steady but mind racing. If they expose this, you lose political cover. Yes. If they expose it through me, you lose internal trust. Yes. Her jaw tightened. So I'm not leverage for them because you want me. No. I'm leverage because someone inside your empire wants this exposed without being blamed. He met her gaze evenly. Yes. The room felt smaller now. More dangerous. Who has clearance to reroute funds at this level? She asked. 4 people. Including you. Yes. She nodded once, absorbing it. The threat had moved inward. This was no longer about attraction. The line echoed in her mind as the weight of it settled. She wasn't the prize. She was the proof. And if the wrong hands decided to clean up the evidence, she would be the easiest piece to remove. She looked at him carefully. If I disappear, she said quietly, the trail goes quiet. He didn't deny it. And that silence was louder than any confession. The music downstairs swelled again, ignorant of the war shifting inside the office. She folded her arms, steady but alert. Who inside your empire is using my job to hide corruption? The silence in the office did not feel romantic. Felt strategic. The numbers on the screens pulsed like quiet accusations. Maya stepped back from the desk, arms folded loosely but posture alert. Jihan watched her process, not with softness, but with assessment. Most people, when placed in proximity to criminal finance, folded, panicked, begged to be distanced from it. She did neither. I can move you tonight, he said calmly. New apartment. New ID. Clean exit. You'll never be connected to this. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes stayed on the screen where her reconciliation code blinked beside rerouted funds. That protects you, she said finally. Not me. He tilted his head slightly. Explain. If I disappear, whoever did this continues. They blame Xianghua. You clean house externally. Internally, the leak remains. Her voice wasn't accusing. It was precise. You think this is internal. It has to be. These routing permissions require inner access. He studied her. And you. I clock in drinks. You sign off nightly totals. Because someone needs a barcode scan. You underestimate the value of adjacency. I don't. That was the first crack of edge. I just refuse to be your shield. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're already exposed. Then give me something useful. Quiet challenge. Not flirtation. Not submission. Transaction. What do you want? He asked. Full visibility. The answer came too quickly to be improvised. If I'm attached to the logs, I see the logs. If someone inside your ranks is using my terminal as cover, I want proof. He didn't respond right away. Giving her access to restricted financial layers was not symbolic. It was irreversible. It meant elevating her beyond staff. Beyond protection. It meant trust. And trust in his world cost more than loyalty. Why? He asked quietly. Because if I'm going down with this, she replied, I want to know who lit the fire. Beat passed. Then another. The club music downstairs vibrated faintly through the floor. You think you can handle what's in those records? He asked. I already handled this much. She nodded toward the screen. He considered the alternatives. Relocate her. Silence the trail. Remove the variable. Or use her proximity as leverage against the real threat. A different kind of protection. You don't get emotional guarantees, he said finally. This is not partnership. I'm not asking for romance. Her tone was flat. I'm asking for data. That landed harder than any flirtation could have. He turned toward the central console and entered a code manually. The system hesitated, then expanded into a deeper network layer. Offshore accounts. Political contributions masked as hospitality investments. Real estate funnels. These are Tier 3 ledgers, he said. No one below Executive Council sees this. She stepped closer to the screen, scanning with quick precision. 4 people have clearance, she murmured. Ooh. Your finance chief. Your operations lieutenant. And one external consultant. Correct. Which one has motive? All of them. The answer came without hesitation. She nodded slowly. Then we narrow by access time. She traced timestamps backward, overlaying her own shift codes mentally. Who approved this transaction at 1:52 a.m. 3 Thursdays ago? She asked. He checked the log. Lieutenant Park. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his expression. And he was physically present in the club, she pressed. Yes. She leaned back slightly. Then he had opportunity. Opportunity isn't guilt. No. But proximity matters. He watched her mind work and felt something shift internally. Not desire. Respect. Dangerous in its own way. You realize, he said quietly, if Park is responsible, this becomes civil war. It already is, she replied. You just didn't see it. The air tightened. He studied her face for fear. There was none. Only calculation. You understand what happens to people inside civil wars, he said. Yes. And you still want in. I'm already in. That was true. And both of them knew it. He reached for a secondary authentication device and handed it to her. Biometric registration, he said. Your access will be tied to this only. You review logs here. Not on your personal devices. She hesitated for half a second, then placed her thumb on the scanner. The system accepted her profile. The screen flashed confirmation. Access granted. That was the irreversible change. She was no longer staff. No longer collateral. She was inside the financial core of his empire. Trust built under threat is never clean, she said quietly. He didn't disagree. This isn't trust, he replied. It's alignment. Temporary alignment, she corrected. We'll see. The faintest trace of something almost like a smile touched his mouth. Not warmth. Recognition. You don't get security detail on this, he added. No one knows. Not even Park. Especially not Park. The name lingered between them like smoke. Downstairs, the club roared back to life, oblivious to the quiet alliance forming above it. Two people who should not be aligned now shared a secret capable of toppling an empire. If we find proof, she said carefully. What happens? He didn't answer immediately. Because what happened next would not be clean. It would not be subtle. It would fracture something fundamental. We act, he said at last. She nodded once. Business concluded. But nothing about it felt safe. The alliance wasn't born from affection. It was born from exposure. And exposure had teeth. As she stepped toward the door, she paused. If Park suspects, she said quietly. He won't target you first. No, Jihan replied evenly. He'll target you. The reality settled heavily between them. What happens when the lieutenant finds out? The shift didn't explode. Spread. Quiet. Subtle. Staff noticed first. The way she disappeared upstairs between shifts. The way security no longer hovered near her but instead gave her deliberate clearance. The way she occasionally checked a secure tablet behind the bar before returning to mix drinks like nothing had changed. Whispers travel faster than music in a place like this. VIPs sensed it next. The usual women who leaned toward Jihan found his attention divided. Not romantically. Strategically. He watched Maya differently now. Not like a man wanting something. Like a man guarding something. That difference was dangerous. Lieutenant Park noticed too. He didn't comment at first. He observed. He catalogued. He waited. On the third night of silence, he chose confrontation. It happened during peak hour. The club was full. Cameras rolling. Politicians' sons laughing too loudly at the VIP table. Park approached from the upper tier with controlled steps, expression composed. Boss, he said evenly. Loud enough to carry but soft enough to appear respectful. Jihan didn't look up immediately. Speak. There's concern. From who? From those invested in the stability of the organization. Calculated phrase. Not accusatory. Suggestive. Jihan finally lifted his gaze. Be direct. Park's eyes flicked toward the bar where Maya was finishing a martini. Your attention has become visible. The room thinned subtly. Conversations quieted without anyone admitting why. Jihan leaned back in his seat. Clarify. You elevated a bartender beyond operational protocol. I own the club. Yes. But she is being treated as more than staff. The accusation landed without volume. Maya didn't look up. But she felt the tension crawl across the room. You question my judgment. Jihan asked calmly. I question optics. That word mattered. Optics were currency. Optics are your department, Jihan replied. Not mine. Park's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Rivals are watching. Let them. They interpret attachment as weakness. There it was. The real accusation. Not incompetence. Attachment. Jihan stood slowly. The movement alone rebalanced the room. Attachment implies lack of control, he said. Do you believe I lack control? Park held eye contact 1 second too long. I believe perception shapes outcome. The club felt smaller now. Staff pretended to polish glasses slower. VIPs leaned subtly closer. Maya's hands continued moving, steady, but her pulse sharpened. This was no longer private. Jihan descended the stairs from VIP deliberately, stopping beside the bar. Beside her. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. The proximity alone was a statement. This establishment, he said evenly, addressing the room without raising his voice, is under my authority. Silence spread like ink. All operations. All personnel. All decisions. His eyes shifted to Park. Including her. Park's face remained neutral. No one disputes your authority. You just did. A thin crack in Park's composure. I suggested caution. Caution is for men who hesitate. Jihan's tone sharpened by a fraction. I do not. The room recalculated. This was no longer internal dialogue. It was public alignment. From this moment, Jihan continued, Maya reports directly to me. The words landed heavier than any shout. Staff froze completely now. Even the DJ sensed something and lowered volume instinctively. Any concerns regarding her role, he added calmly. Come to me. Park's eyes flicked briefly toward Maya. Not with anger. With assessment. Understood, he said. But it didn't sound like agreement. Sounded like calculation. Jihan's gaze swept the room once. When power becomes personal, empires tremble, he said quietly. The line wasn't for the crowd. It was for Park. A warning disguised as philosophy. Maya finally looked up. Just once. Their eyes met. Not soft. Not grateful. Just aware. The club exhaled slowly as Jihan returned to the VIP tier. The music resumed. Conversations restarted. But the equilibrium had shifted permanently. She was no longer neutral. No longer staff. No longer background. She was positioned. Publicly. And public positioning in this world meant target acquisition. Park remained near the bar for a few seconds longer than necessary. Careful, he murmured softly, not looking at her directly. Visibility invites storms. She didn't respond. Didn't react. Just continued polishing the counter. But she felt the temperature drop. Upstairs, Jihan watched Park return to his seat. Something in the lieutenant's posture had changed. Not defiance. Not submission. Strategy. Jihan had just drawn a visible line in front of witnesses. Protected her. Elevated her. And in doing so, he had fractured something subtle within his own hierarchy. Because protection in his world was never neutral. It was a declaration. And declarations forced reactions. Down on the floor, a quiet recalculation unfolded in dozens of minds. If she reported only to him, she was either leverage or liability. And liabilities in power structures did not survive long. Maya set down a finished drink and felt it settle. The alliance upstairs had been private. This moment was not. This was exposure. This was alignment. This was irreversible. Somewhere in the room, beneath the music and flashing lights, a decision crystallized in someone's mind. Which man in the room just decided she has to disappear? The lights died mid-beat. 1 second the club was neon and noise. The next, darkness swallowed everything. Not the slow dim of a technical glitch. Clean cut. Total blackout. The bass stopped. Glass shattered somewhere near the entrance. A woman screamed. Maya didn't freeze. She ducked instinctively, dropping below the counter. Years of working late nights had trained her body faster than fear. Upstairs, Jihan didn't move at first. He listened. Chaos has patterns. Panic does not. This wasn't panic. This was timed. A single muzzle flash erupted from the balcony opposite VIP. Not wild. Controlled. One shot. The bullet tore through the shelf behind the bar exactly where Maya had been standing seconds earlier. Jihan moved before anyone else processed it. He vaulted the VIP railing without hesitation. His security reacted a fraction too slow. Another shot cracked through the dark. This one lower. Aimed where she had dropped. He hit the floor near the bar and pulled her flat behind the marble counter just as a third round shattered glass above them. "Stay down," he said sharply. She didn't argue. Around them bodies scrambled. Tables overturned. Guards drew weapons. Emergency lights flickered dim red along the walls, painting the club in war color. "Second balcony," one of his men shouted. 2 gunshots answered. "Return fire." The shooter tried to retreat. Jihan rose partially from behind the counter, gun already drawn. He didn't hesitate, didn't calculate optics, didn't care about witnesses. He fired once. Precise. The silhouette on the balcony dropped. Security stormed upward. Within seconds, the shooter was dragged down the stairs alive, bleeding but conscious. The club was silent now except for the low hum of backup generators. Maya remained crouched, breath steady but pulse loud in her ears. Jihan looked at her once. "Quick. Cessing." "You hit?" he asked. "No." He nodded once, then stood. The shooter was forced to his knees in the center of the club floor. Blood streaked down his temple. One of Jihan's men pressed a gun to his skull. "Who sent you?" Jihan asked calmly. The man laughed weakly. "You already know." Jihan crouched in front of him. "I don't ask twice." The man's eyes flicked briefly, just briefly, toward the VIP tier. Too brief for most people to notice. Not for Jihan. He stood slowly. "Clear the room," he ordered. "No," Maya said sharply from behind the bar. Every head turned. That was not her place to speak. But she had seen it too. The glance. Not toward her. Toward VIP. "Interrogate him here," she said quietly. Park stiffened upstairs. Jihan's eyes darkened. He studied the shooter again. "Who authorized this?" he asked. Silence. A gun cocked louder this time. The shooter swallowed. "You made it obvious," he muttered. "You made her visible. That's not a name. Lieutenant Park." The room inhaled sharply. Park didn't run. That was the most dangerous part. He descended the stairs slowly, hands visible, expression calm. "You're taking the word of a hired assassin?" he asked evenly. The club was now a courtroom. Jihan didn't answer him immediately. He walked to the center of the floor. Park stopped 3 steps away. "You destabilized internal structure," Park said quietly. "Publicly. Repeatedly." "She is under my protection," Jihan replied. "You declared that. Loudly. And enemies exploit weakness." A thin silence stretched. Maya felt it snap. "This wasn't about weakness," she said from the bar. Every head turned again. Park's gaze shifted to her. Cold. Measuring. "You're out of your depth," he said softly. "Am I?" she replied. Jihan didn't look at her. He was watching Park. Calculating loyalty. Calculating optics. Calculating damage. The shooter groaned on his knees. Jihan turned abruptly. Without warning. Without ceremony. He drew his weapon and fired. The bullet tore through Park's chest before the room fully processed the motion. Shouting. Security moving. Park collapsed backward, eyes wide. Not surprised. Almost resigned. The shooter began to speak again. Jihan silenced him with a second shot. 2 bodies. 1 minute. Public. Permanent. The music never resumed. Security froze in place. Maya stared at Jihan, not in shock, but in comprehension. He had just executed a senior captain in front of witnesses. There would be no quiet cleanup. No private restructuring. This was declaration. Blood on marble. Some lines, he said quietly, lowering his weapon. Once crossed, don't fade. The room trembled. Not from sound. From recalibration. He had chosen her. Over hierarchy. Over tradition. Over internal balance. And that choice would echo. Security began moving again, clearing bodies, shutting down cameras, controlling exits. But the fracture was visible. Captains exchanged glances. Alliances shifted in real time. Maya stepped out from behind the bar slowly. You didn't hesitate, she said quietly. He didn't look at her. He forced the timing. No, she replied. You did. That landed harder than the gunshot. 'Cause she was right. He could have detained. Investigated quietly. Maintained internal balance. Instead he chose alignment. Public. Irreversible. The club floor, once controlled by his presence alone, now felt unstable. Loyalty had been executed alongside betrayal. And witnesses remembered. Upstairs, 2 captains whispered. Downstairs, one quietly stepped away from the group. Seeds planted. Fractures forming. Power does not forgive impulsive displays. Even strategic ones. Maya felt the weight settle in her chest. He had shielded her. He had killed for her. But the throne beneath him had shifted. She looked around the room, then back at him. Did you just weaken your own empire? She asked softly. He finally met her eyes. And for the first time, there was no certainty there. By morning the city pretended nothing had happened. The club reopened with new glass, new lighting, new silence. But retaliation does not announce itself with sirens. Spreads like smoke through closed rooms. One of Jihan's secondary lounges burned before sunrise. Not a dramatic explosion. Just a controlled fire in the back office. No casualties. Message. 2 hours later, a shipment at the docks was delayed by anonymous inspection orders. By noon, 3 political allies cancelled scheduled meetings. The execution in the club had not stayed private. Never could. Someone leaked footage. Blurred. Cropped. But recognizable. Headlines didn't name him directly, but they didn't need to. Nightclub violence tied to organized power struggles. Internal rift within Korean syndicate. His enemies did not attack loudly. They applied pressure. Slowly. Precisely. Maya felt it in smaller ways first. A regular customer refused eye contact. Another bartender requested reassignment. The security around her doubled again. No longer subtle. Visible. Then her phone began vibrating. Unknown numbers. Social media tags. A photo of her standing behind the bar from 3 weeks ago. Reposted across anonymous forums. Captioned. The weakness. Her jaw tightened. She deleted the notifications without comment. Upstairs, Jihan reviewed damage reports with controlled calm. 3 properties targeted, his advisor said quietly. No fatalities. And politically uncertain. They're waiting. Waiting was worse than attack. It meant leverage still in motion. Maya entered the office without knocking. She no longer waited for permission. My mother got a call, she said evenly. The room went still. From who? A man who knew her address. Knew my brother's school schedule. Jihan's expression didn't change, but something in the room shifted colder. What did he say? Nothing threatening. Just asked if she was proud of her daughter's new associations. Silence stretched heavy. They're escalating externally, she continued. Because internally wasn't enough. He nodded once. I'll handle it. You already did, she said quietly. You killed a captain. He ordered the hit. And now others want compensation. She stepped closer. This is spreading. He stood slowly. Your family will be moved. The words landed before she processed them. No, it's not optional. You don't get to decide that. I do when they become leverage. They're not yours. That line cut sharper than she intended. He held her gaze evenly. They are if enemies use them. Her breath slowed. She understood the logic. That didn't make it less suffocating. You're not relocating them, she said. I already have. The silence that followed was different. Not explosive. Final. What? They were moved at dawn. Secure housing. New security perimeter. Limited visibility. Her chest tightened. Without telling me. You would have argued. Because it's my family. And now they are under my protection. The phrase felt heavier than iron. Protection. A word that had once sounded strategic now sounded permanent. For how long? She asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. Because they both knew the truth. Until the threat dissolves. And when does that happen? It doesn't. The realization settled slowly in her spine. Her family wasn't just protected. They were contained. Protection always leaves smoke, she said softly. He didn't argue. Downstairs another call came in. One of his mid-level distributors had been arrested on financial irregularities. The charges were clean. Too clean. Political pressure had begun aligning against him. Not a war. Tightening. Maya turned away from the screens and walked to the window overlooking the club floor. Everything looked normal. Bartenders mixing drinks. VIPs laughing. But she could feel the fracture beneath it. They leaked my name deliberately, she said. Yes. They want me visible. Yes. So your enemies attack the surface while someone inside rebuilds structure. He didn't deny it. 'Cause she was right. The execution had silenced Park. It had not silenced ambition. You relocated my family, she said again, slower this time. Which means they're marked as connected to you. They were already marked through you. No, she replied. Now they're marked as owned. That word lingered between them. Not protected. He stepped closer, voice lower. Ownership is what keeps them alive. At what cost? He didn't answer. Because the cost was visible everywhere now. Burned properties. Political distance. Media whispers. Her face circulating through encrypted channels. She felt the cage forming around everything she touched. Not because he wanted to trap her. Because his world did not understand half measures. You are either outside or you are absorbed. There is no safe edge. Her phone buzzed again. Photo this time. Her mother standing outside a gated compound she did not recognize. Surrounded. Trap. Maya closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them there was no panic. Only clarity. You saved them, she said quietly. Yes. And caged them. He didn't respond. Because both were true. The club lights shimmered below. The empire still stood. But its foundation had shifted. And so had her life. Permanently. She turned back to him slowly. Can I walk away now, she asked. Without them paying for it. The answer hung heavy in the air. Because they both already knew. Can she love a man who cages everyone he saves? The fires stopped first. No more smoke on the horizon. No more anonymous inspections. The political meetings resumed quietly, one by one, as if the interruption had been seasonal weather. Xianghua withdrew from visible pressure. No apologies. No declarations. Just absence. The empire stabilized the way powerful systems do, without admitting they had shaken. The club reopened fully. Music returned to full volume. VIP tables refilled. New glass replaced broken shelves. If anyone asked, it had been an isolated incident. An unfortunate disagreement. Order restored. But stabilization is not peace. It is tension redistributed. Maya stood behind the bar again, posture steady, expression unreadable. The security around her had reduced. Not vanished. Reduced. Her family remained in guarded housing. If contained. Jihan watched from the upper tier, no longer performing dominance, simply present. Something between them had shifted beyond attraction, beyond alliance. It was structural now. Permanent in ways neither had fully named. He descended the stairs slowly and stopped beside her station. No announcement. No spectacle. Just proximity. The situation has cooled, he said evenly. She didn't look at him immediately. Cooled isn't ended. Nothing ends. It stabilizes. That was true. She set a finished drink on the counter and wiped her hands slowly. My family, she said quietly. They remain under protection. Yes. Indefinitely. Yes. Silence settled, but it was no longer explosive. It was reflective. You can leave, he said suddenly. The words cut through the hum of the club. She looked at him fully then. Leave what? All of it. His tone was controlled. Not emotional. No security. No tracking. No leverage. I'll release the contracts tied to your access credentials. Your family remains safe but unmarked. She studied his face carefully. Unmarked. I absorb the visibility. They fade back into private status. That was not a small offer. It was structural reversal. And the club, she asked. You resign. He paused. Clean. She held his gaze for several seconds. The offer wasn't romantic. It wasn't a plea. It was strategic mercy. The kind only powerful men offer when they recognize damage. Why? She asked quietly. He didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was not strategic. It was personal. Because you were never meant to be absorbed, he said finally. The bass pulsed beneath them. Staff pretended not to listen. She stepped out from behind the bar slowly. One step toward the exit corridor. Just one. The distance felt enormous. This was the exit. No cage. No ownership. No debt. Her family protected. Her name erased from internal records. Clean. She could walk. She did not look back immediately. She reached the threshold of the corridor and paused. Not because she feared outside danger. Because she understood something heavier. Outside his world, she would regain autonomy. Inside it she had influence. Not as ornament. As variable. She turned back slowly. The club continued moving as if nothing critical was happening. Jihan remained where he stood. Not approaching. Not persuading. Waiting. That was new. If I walk, she said quietly, the internal corruption continues in some form. I will handle it. You handled it with bullets last time. A faint flicker in his expression. This time differently. She considered that. Then she shook her head slightly. No one word. Final. No. If I stay, it's not as protected collateral. Her voice was steady. It's as stake. The room seemed to inhale. He understood immediately. You're choosing visibility, he said. On my terms, she replied. That was the shift. Not surrender. Not romance. Structure. He signaled subtly to the club manager. Within minutes, a formal document was brought forward. Not rushed. Not whispered. Drafted. Clean. Effective immediately, he said evenly, voice carrying just enough to reach VIP tables. Maya Thompson is named co-operational partner of this establishment. A ripple moved across the floor. Not shock. Recalculation. Her authority supersedes mid-level financial oversight. The words were deliberate. Surgical. Public record. Permanent tie. Strategic. Not romantic. She stepped back behind the bar, not as staff but as stakeholder. The shift was subtle to outsiders. Devastating to insiders. Because this wasn't protection. It was integration. Ownership shared. Not possession. Alignment. Silence returned. Not literal but emotional. He did not smile. She did not soften. The empire remained intact. Enemies quiet. Internal fracture addressed. But something irreversible had occurred. He had offered her freedom. She had chosen influence. On equal footing. As the music swelled again and the club resumed its rhythm, Jihan understood something he had not allowed himself to name before. He controlled the entire club. Every voice. Every room. Every outcome. Except her. She had stepped toward the door. And chosen to turn back. Not because he whispered possession. But because she refused to be reduced to it. And in his world, the one thing you cannot control is the only thing that can undo you.